So I've loaded the data, and now it's time to do some transformations on that data to just clean it up and make sure it's in a sensible format. You can see here are the 5 queries that we've got that corresponds to the 5 tables rather that I connected to in our data source. I've got a preview of the data in the middle here, and on the right hand side I can see the name of the query. In this case I'm actually just going to rename this to date, and I can see this area, the applied steps. Now this means these are the different transformations or steps that have been applied from connecting to that data source, navigating to a particular table, and then as I start to do things like changing the data type or splitting columns up or renaming them, they'll get added as steps here. So it's really easy to go back and replay, see what changes have happened to this data. So like I said, this date table, I need to do some simple things in here. So let's just duplicate this date column to start with. When I right click on a column, I get a whole bunch of different options in terms of transformations that I can apply here. You can see I can do things like removing a particular column or removing everything else if I've got lots and lots of columns. We're going to go through a few more of these other ones, but I'm just going to duplicate this for now. And you can see a new column gets added to the right hand side, and a new step gets applied on this right hand pane. Now I wanted to duplicate this because the first thing I'm going to do is actually change the data type of this. So you can see back on our Home tab that this data got pulled in just as a text field. Well, actually it's a date, so let's go and change the data type to date. And you can see the Power BI desktop has parsed this into the date format. I can rename this column here as well, just by double clicking. And now I can start to do some more transformations and operations on this. Power BI's got an inherent sort of understanding of how dates work. And on this Add Column tab, you can see I've got some different things that I can use to extract different bits of information from this date column. So if I wanted to look at, find the date that contained the start date of the month that each row was in, or I could do something like extracting the day of the week for this particular date. So let's take that. We'll create a new column, and you can see we've got an index from 0 to 6 for all of the different days of the week. So we can see that the 1st of January 1999 was a Thursday, Saturday rather. We're 0 indexing this. So the 1st to the 2nd was Sunday, and then 1-3 was Monday, etc., etc. I might also go and extract something similar like quarters, or which week of the year was it. So those first 2 were in the first week of the year, running up until Sunday, and then the second week started on the 3rd of January. So I can do some clever different types of transformations using dates here. I've got some more tables that I want to go and change. So actually our geography table's fine. I'm just going to rename that one. Rename it correctly. Oops. Geography. I'm going to rename our manufacturer table. Again, we've only got a couple of columns here, so not very much to change. And then our product table. Let's give that a new name as well. And there's a simple transformation that I want to do here as well. You can see I've got an ID and then a product name. Now this product name contains the manufacturer and then some code. And actually we've already got a column for the manufacturer, so this is a little bit redundant. Let's extract the product code into its own column. So again, I'm going to duplicate this column first because I want to keep the old one around. And now what I want to do is actually split this column up. When I right click on the column, I'll see there's an option to split columns. And this is one of the most common operations that we see people doing. I've got a choice. I can either do it by a fixed number of characters if I know that the product code's always going to be a certain number of characters long, or I can do it by a delimiter. So a delimiter is saying I want to split this on a comma or a semicolon or a space in our case. So I'm going to choose from here a space, and then I can choose, do I want to split it once at the first instance of the space, once at the rightmost or the last delimiter, or at each occurrence of the delimiter. So if I've got a long string of text that's got many spaces or commas in it, it would create a different column for each one of those. In this case, I actually just want to do it once, and I'll hit OK. So now you can see this column's been split up. I've got the manufacturer name and then the product code separate. Now, this is obviously a bit redundant given that I've got the manufacturer column right next to it. And I can rename this one. This is our product code. So now I've been able to enhance this data set with a little bit more information that might make it easier to build reports and do further analysis. So my final table here is my fact sales table. So let's just rename this one sales fact. And you can see in here I've got keys to the products and dates when these things were, the sales were made. You can see the zip code that it was made, and then I've got just some numbers about the units and the revenue that were used. And actually there's nothing else that I need to do for that query either. So once I'm happy and I've done all the transformations to the queries that I need, back on my Home tab, I've got this option to close and apply those changes. And now what will happen is we'll go and create the connection back to that data source, and we'll start loading all of that data. Previously we were just looking at a preview, but now you can see we've pulled in the rows from these date, geography, manufacturer tables, and we're loading that sales fact table as well. And we're applying all of those transformations, all of those different steps that we had defined earlier, and pulling that data into the Power BI desktop. Now I'm not going to wait for this to complete. We've got quite a few million rows in here, and you can see it's pulling through them fairly quickly. When you go through the lab yourself, you can see how long that takes, and when you're connecting to your own data source, you can see how long that takes too. So let's pick this up in the next segment.